Hello, hello.
So for a second, I thought it was off, but it appears that.
All right, so this is the steering committee, and today is June 6th, 2018. 4 years since the first commit of Kubernetes, which is exciting. So happy birthday, Kubernetes. And we are now trying to figure out if we have quorum/agenda for the meeting today.
In our notes, there are no particular outstanding topics, and I can officially say that my action item from last time has not been executed.
Well, my action item has been, I haven't merged, or no, I merged it, so, which was how we're going to remove projects.
Brendan, are you hanging out with a bunch of dogs, or?
I'm walking.
Oh, okay, so it's,
I'll unmute.
It's air on the microphone then, but okay.
I'll take notes if somebody wants to be bosun.
So I guess a couple of standing things we had were the Code of Conduct Committee nominations and when we wanted to close that and whether we had enough nominations, and then the charter reviews.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we never started an email thread on the mailing list about that, but SIGAPS, for example, is asking about their charter, and I do want to make sure that we look across at least a few charters before we decide to move forward with them. So we really need to get moving on that.
Yeah, I was going to wonder about that. SIG Azure was also asking, and I was a little bit unclear, have we delegated to the reviewers power to approve, or are we going to try and do something with consensus thing?
Well, what we were trying to do is, originally the process we had in mind was get a half dozen or so charters, and we had some from SIGAP, SIGNode, SIG Contributor Experience, et cetera, and look at those, decide whether we thought the template was working, whether it was good enough, whether we needed to change it. And there have been some issues identified with it with respect to details of decision-making and leadership structure and so on. Then provide a round of feedback to those that first group of charters, update the template, and then kind of open it to the masses after that. And we have a bunch of new SIGs being proposed, which are developing their own, and they're kind of moving ahead in the process. But at the same time, the cloud provider, there's a proposal for a cloud provider SIG. And, so that's sort of underway, and it's muddying the water about whether we should have like SIG, Baidu, and some of the others that have been proposed. I don't remember the full list, but there have been multiple other providers proposing SIGs. But somebody actually just needs to spend time corralling those SIGs. One issue that has come up is some people don't want to lose their status as SIG leads.
Which is why we're calling them SIG chairs and making them less a status-y thing.
Well, they can be the sub project lead or whatever. We need to make that more attractive, I guess, or more clear.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have the proposals for new SIGs. I think we should, another thing, and this is related to this, it's really sort of charter approval, we should find a process to be able to make the call on that. Like, I think, we're kind of blocked in terms of how to make progress with the, what were they calling it? I'm going to call it SIG SDK, which is the platform tools provider stuff. I think, some of that is like, what should be in scope? How does it relate? That type of thing. So I think it's worthwhile for us to have discussions there and try and at least close that out and give people a thumbs up, thumbs down.
Yeah, I think KubeBuilder was already accepted by API Machinery. So that's moving forward under that umbrella.
Well, and again, so my objection there, at least, I don't want to delve into the details here without the right folks necessarily putting their best foot forward, but my objection was not KubeBuilder per se, as much as like does it make sense to have a SIG that does these ancillary systems like Cube Builder, when really the elephant in the room is that we need an SDK that actually sort of looks across the entire developer experience, including Client Go. And I think then there's the question of like, should Client Go be part of some sort of SIG SDK, or should it be part of API machinery, and how do we actually go ahead and tease that apart?
Yeah, so I actually think that all the client libraries, including, well, I would say all the client libraries should be in the SDK SIG. I agree with that. Whether the existing Client Go or not should be something we actually tell other users that they should use. I think that's an issue that we need to figure out. I think the people who are proposing the SDK or PDK or whatever you want to call it, SIG didn't want to make it look like they were trying to grab stuff away from API machinery.
That's an uncomfortable discussion, but this is the group that should be having that uncomfortable discussion.
I mean,
Yeah,
isn't
so
the SIG architecture? I feel like we've delegated this all to SIG architecture.
Well, the decision about technical things that are in scope is SIG architecture. The decision about delegating who has authority over what within the project is steering committee.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. But I didn't really think API machinery really wanted SDK. Like, I feel like, I don't know.
No, they didn't. They didn't want it. They said, well, we don't think we can let go of Client Go right now because it's intertwined with all the rest of the machinery. But I actually think Client Go is not a suitable base for.
I'd be happy. So I mean, as probably the most active member of the SDK, maybe the only member of the SDK group, I'd be happy to regen, like if we gen a Go client, and I'd be happy to lift or re-implement whatever we need to produce a Go client that looks more like the Java and C# SDKs.
So y'all are being engineers.
Yep.
Who's bosun? Because I want to have this discussion. We should have this discussion, and I want to respond to all of that. I'm not sure this is the time and place for that. What I think we need to do is we do need to actually be able to have a conversation, perhaps as part of the sort of the steering committee office hours, where we have the folks making that case in. We actually have a process for them to make the case, and then we make a call.
Yeah,
Right?
so that's a great example where we would need to have a steering committee office hour. Otherwise, we have to go to API machinery. Or people end up going to SIG architecture, even though that's not really the right place.
Which was my action item, and I will make it happen this time.
Okay, I think that's a great first topic. Let's just close on that. I feel bad when folks are trying to make progress on something and we just stall out, right? And so,
Well, I think they're making progress. I mean, the projects are underway either under API machinery or outside Kubernetes, right? And I think
I actually think the outcome's not that bad, because it was sort of like, hey, if you want to do this, go out or find a home, and that's what they did.
Well, okay, so maybe the answer there is like, hey, we don't need to actually do this as a separate SIG now, and we can actually say that. Right now the issue is open, right? That proposal with the charter is open.
Why don't we close it out? And the other thing I would say is, have we documented exactly what Brian just said, which is architecture for technical decisions, SIG for charter? I mean, I know we've talked about it before, but is it written down in an easily discoverable place?
The steering committee charter is written in such a way that all the powers are held by the steering committee and it delegates them out. So it's not clear that SIG architecture, what's delegated to SIG architecture from the steering committee charter.
Yeah. So maybe we should have a list of like explicit delegations or something. And I'm happy to take the pen. I'm happy to take the pen on writing that.
I think we were hoping that would end up in the SIG charters, that the SIG charters would include their scope and including their responsibilities and the powers delegated to them, and the steering committee would approve that.
Is that sufficient though?
I think that's trickier, right? Because it's sort of like, that requires that somebody understand the union of everything and make sure there's not overlaps. And I feel like there's a few of these things. Like, I wouldn't say we should do it for everything, but I feel like there's a few small things where it's worth just explicitly delegating instead of having the charter be the implicit.
I agree.
Power.
Yeah, I'm not saying the original idea was workable. I'm just saying that was what I thought the original idea was.
I'll take a stab at writing a quick, like a quick fact style, maybe even doc.
And I think what this does go to show that, like, getting closure on the SIG architecture, because it is such a pivotal SIG charter, is going to be necessary.
Well, I think there. Well, I don't want to discuss too much SIG architecture stuff here, but I do want to make sure we come to closure on the main kind of activities and how it's going to have impact and how we want to structure that, and then go back to the roles that need to be filled. We still have some open issues there. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get broader technical representation from other SIGs and SIG architecture, because I'm hoping it would be a more effective way to drive consistency and understanding across the project.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not saying that that's an easy thing. I'm just saying that a lot of it ends up hinging on that.
Yeah.
Phil, how's it going, sir?
Hey, good to see you all. Sorry about dropping in late.
No
Yeah,
worries.
we already discussed something relevant to you, which is the SDK SIG.
Okay. What was the outcome of that discussion?
I think the outcome is that it's the first topic we're going to discuss at our office hours. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
The right people aren't in this room.
Yeah.
We started going down a rat hole, and then we pulled ourselves out of the
Which,
nosedive.
to be fair, we should note as impressive and one of the few times we've done it. Celebrate the little things.
We each need to have a gong so the bosun can just have a gong.
Who's taking notes? This is historic.
It's like I was taking notes, so I'll
But we
say-
have no volunteered bosun. My network is crappy enough that I can't really do it because I miss chunks of conversation, so my apologies.
I'm taking notes and also trying to play a little bit of bosun, so there we go. So lots of technical discussions, but we decided we didn't have the right people in the room and pulled back. Okay. Okie dokie. Let's see, Code of Conduct Committee nominations. Michelle couldn't make it today. Do we want to table that? Or do we have a good view here? Do we want to do this on an open line? I can pause the recording.
I think we need to pick an end date for the nominations, and
Okay.
then beyond that, we wait until the end date.
But
Does anybody know, do we have a sufficient number of nominations that we actually have a choice?
I was going to say, I have no idea.
I know we
think
nominated a few.
in the thread that I saw, there were 4 or 5 people who had been nominated. This doesn't need to be a committee of 20. In fact, I would recommend very strongly that it is a small committee and we have a clear leader for it.
I think 5 people is enough if it's the right 5 people.
Yeah.
I was thinking 3 to 5, so yeah.
Okay.
Do we want to take, and maybe we discussed this before and I apologize. Do we want to take nominations from the wider committee? Because we've been keeping this whole sort of nomination process a little bit scoped. Maybe seeding it to the first time, we actually want to be a little bit more careful. Is that the idea?
Well, I don't know if we've established how these folks will be replaced. But committees are, other than the steering committee, the committees on the project are not necessarily, don't have membership that's chosen the same way as SIGs, for example, SIGs and working groups where it's open to everybody. I think we do need to be selective. I don't want it to be, taking a broader set of ideas is fine, but I think handpicking the folks is a reasonable thing to do.
So we're going to say the steering committee is going to handpick these folks. The question is that nominations form. We haven't shared that very widely. Is that something that we want to do?
And there might be people who would be great at it who have not been nominated. That's entirely possible.
I don't see a ton of harm, right?
What are we going to do when we have 75?
Yeah, I mean, as long as we're clear that we're just going to pick people we think would be good at it, like make good judgments, be discreet, etc. When we send it out, so people aren't disappointed or complain or escalate if they don't get picked.
Okay, so I'm going to say, what about sharing the nomination form more widely? I'm going to tag Michelle on it because obviously we don't want to make any decisions here without her input since she's been driving this process, and we can sort of maybe take that discussion a little bit offline. Does that sound good?
Yep.
Yeah. Or take it online.
Online? I guess, yeah, that's true.
Off the video onto the Ethernets.
Oh, okay, so wait, so which address for Michelle do we actually put here? We do. Brendan,
Not
you use the
AS.
Microsoft one, and
It should be michelle.nerale@Microsoft, I think. I mean, unless she wants to do some different one, I don't know.
no, she used her Gmail one. I happen to have enough autocomplete. I can
It's because I think she needs to use the Gmail one for Google Docs.
No,
You don't have to.
Oh,
No, you don't have to, but you do have to go through a hoop in order to. So the easiest hoop is to use your Gmail, but if you can actually set up a Google account with any arbitrary email address, and then it all just magically works.
Well, that I know. Some companies have policies against that or something. But
Oh, yeah, they might. I don't know. I didn't check.
So one thing I do want to note, just to inform folks, I don't want to put it in the notes. The issue that we had earlier around, I'm going to pause the recording here real quick.
Yeah, Brian broke Slack when he did it.
All right,
Dude, I broke the web
back on
search build at Google. I can deal with anything.
it's also people got notified who were on the other side of the planet and stuff like that too. So it broke through normal blocks, which I didn't really intend.
All right, so I want to summarize sort of the action item coming out of the discussion that we just had for the recording. We've been having some issues around abuse on Zoom meetings, and so we're going to. Brendan took an action item to reach out widely to let folks know our best practices for locking stuff down, combined with notification not to share those Zoom links very widely because we think it's folks outside the community that may be trolling and harassing here. And that if folks do see something happen, that they should report it to the code of conduct so that we can track this and understand how big a problem this is and how hard and fast we want to push for building different types of mitigation. So, all right, so that's the summary as we come back online. And then we were joking about doing the like at all or whatever it is on Slack or at everyone. That totally brings Slack to its knees, and we're not going to do that. Okay.
They may have scaled since then.
Yeah.
But so has our number of Slack members has more than doubled.
Let's find out.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
We don't have anything else on the agenda. We can leave early. I did want to ask one quick question. I don't want to rat hole on it, so please. There's this idea of being clear about what powers are dedicated to SIG architecture and others, and Brendan was going to take a note on putting together a fact there. One question that came up, and I'm not quite sure who to ask this of, is in terms of do different SIGs and different sub-projects have the sort of the charter to release binaries off cycle in their own way, right? COPS was doing this. It's kind of a little bit sort of a grandfathered in. Is this something that we want to support, that we want to document? Would that be a SIG release type of thing? Is that a SIG architecture thing?
I think ultimately it needs to land in SIG release. I mean, SIG architecture could say that the project should be doing this, but SIG release would need to own it and work out the details. That has definitely come up that think binaries are produced and pushed and that we don't have any kind of clear guidelines or rules about where they're allowed to live, whether they have to be signed or not. There are like all kinds of implications about this. Every sub-project that's outside of Kubernetes does this a different way.
Okay, so
yeah, I mean, there's a degree of this in the repos doc where it sort of says like, you have to be core if you want to be released in a release, but it doesn't outline a lot of these details like signing and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so what I'm taking away here is that whether or not we should be doing off-cycle releases and who does what, where, and where that code has to live, that's kind of a policy thing that probably lands in SIG architecture. The mechanics around signing and how and where and that stuff, that's a SIG release type of thing.
Yeah,
sure. And while we're on the related topics, can I give a quick update on the core DNS issue that was up a few weeks ago? So the decision that I took from there was not to fork core DNS into our space. So I took their container images that they published to Docker Hub as a manifest list, and I mirrored them into our GCR for the 1.11 release. So anybody can pull kates.gcr.io/core DNS :113, and it will pull CoreDNS. The checksums are the same as the Docker Hub checksums, and everybody seems to be okay with that, and we will see how it goes from here.
Now that doesn't work with things like Notary, right? Because Notary involves the name that the thing's hosted on. The identity of the container image and where it's hosted are actually.
I believe that's correct, and we didn't cross that bridge yet.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I mean, Notary, well, yeah, I mean, that's a whole other thing. I mean,
I don't like, sorry. I don't like
that is intended to do things like help you make sure that you have the most up-to-date version and things like that, as opposed to just signing something that at some point was valid. And so I don't think we need to go all the way there as yet.
Right.
We can punt that to SIG release, honestly. I don't think that should be in our wheelhouse.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, SIG architecture is kind of responsible for consistency across the project and overall guidelines and things like that. But yeah, the technical details of things that are owned by specific SIGs, and I think this does fall under SIG release, are up to those SIGs overall.
Okay.
I think the main challenge is the SIG release probably doesn't have enough people to take on a huge new initiative to go straighten out things and all the other SIGs. Probably. But maybe we can get those projects to step up if we can get some guidelines put together or something like that.
Yeah, I think writing a doc probably is a good first step.
Yeah.
Brian, you and I had been talking about some of the people and groups in different parts of the community that are asking for things without providing support and chopping wood and carrying water for the project. And this might be a really good way to get them involved in something that the project needs.
That's a good point. Yeah, test coverage and release automation are areas of desperate need of people. And we used to have a principle about, when new people showed up at the community, we gave them bugs to fix and things like that. That's kind of fallen through the cracks, I feel. And we still, like I was trying to make my way through some of the KEPs that are proposed, and we still have people who've never submitted a PR before, whose companies never submitted a PR before, show up with some massive proposal, and it's clear they don't understand the system or the basics or the expectations. So clarifying some of that. I just looked at the contributor guide, and the language has been somewhat muddled in this area about how to get started. Like it does say show up at a SIG and try to pick up some bugs, but the faster, or the guidance about how to get faster PR reviews used to be more clear about this. Don't show up with
10,000 lines
or something like that, and it's no longer as clear.
Yeah, I had to explain to one of our product managers. He's like, how do we get stuff into Kubernetes? And I'm like, well, you got to show up and get to know people. It's like, and then
learn the system
gets done when people actually do the work to get stuff done, right? Otherwise, it doesn't get done. He's like, but that's not how it works. I'm like, yeah, that's how the open source works.
Yeah, so that may be a tool, and cleaning up the contributor guidelines or adding more clarity in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was, there's been some back and forth in terms of the contributor guidelines, in terms of folks signing up and then disappearing. Last I talked to George on this, so that stuff has not moved as fast as I think.
Yeah.
Tim Pepper's been thinking about this too. I think he has a document out with different ideas.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Any other topics? Going once. Going twice. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for note-taking and bosoning in combo.
All right. I'll post the video also. See y'all later.
Have a good week. Happy birthday.
Bye.
Bye.